was a professor of law and also the on that TV. This is join me welcome
in Israel. It pleased our Creator to bestow His heritage on the family of Chief and Mrs. Francis Alabi in Noye local government. That heritage was simply christened Kayode Fayemi. Kayode had his elementary education at Ibadan before gaining admission to the prestigious Christ School at Ekiti as a member of the 1975-1986. After obtaining the West African School certificate with grade 1, he proceeded to the Federal School of Arts and Science, Ondo, in October 1980 for high school certificate, the equivalent of General Certificate of Education Advanced Level, leading him to a direct entry into the University of Lagos in October 1982, where he received a Bachelor of Arts degree in History and Political Science in 1985. Kayode served as a member of the National Youth Service Corps in 1985-1986 session, where he was deployed to lecture at the Nigerian Police College, Sokoto, for his primary assignment. He later proceeded to the University of Ife, now Obafemi University, for a master's in international relations in 1986-1987 session. In his quest for deeper knowledge, Kayode Fayemi secured admission to the King's College, University of London, England, where he backed a PhD in war studies, specializing in civil and military relations. With his research and policy interests in democratization, constitutionalism, security sector governance, and regionalism in the global context. Prior to his establishment of the Center for Democracy and Development, Dr. Fayemi worked as a lecturer, journalist, researcher, and strategy development advisor in Nigeria and the United Kingdom. He was strategy development advisor in the UK. He was strategy development advisor in Nigeria and the United African Research and Information Bureau in London, UK. He also was a reporter with The Guardian and City Temple newspapers, editor of the Political Monthly, Nigeria Now, as well as a consultant at Development and Management Consultants. As a prominent leader of the Nigerian opposition in exile, he was actively involved in the establishment of Radio Freedom, Radio Democracy International, and Radio Gujarat. He played a central role in the opposition's diplomatic engagements and scholarly work in exile during the infamous military rule in Nigeria. Among his numerous academic and public policy engagements at home and abroad, Kayode Fayemi has lectured in Africa, Europe, America, and Asia. He also served as an advisor on transitional justice, regional integration, constitutionalism, security sector reform, and civil-military relations issues to various governments, intergovernmental institutions, and development agencies. He was the main technical advisor to Nigeria's Human Rights Violations Investigation Commission, Okuta. He served the Presidential Implementation Committees on Security Sector Reform, NEPAD, and Millennium Development Goals. He was technical expert to ECOWAS on small arms and light weapons, and United Nations Economic Commission of Africa on governance issues. He is also a member of Africa Policy Advisory Panel of the British government. At other times, he served as a consultant to the OECD on security sector reform and chaired the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiatives Committee on experts on developing guiding principles and mechanisms of constitution making in Commonwealth Africa. For Peace and Conflict Studies, University of Ibadan, as well as an adjunct professor of security studies at the African Center for Strategic Studies, National Defense University, Fort Marquette, Washington, D.C., United States of America. Professor in the African Studies program at Northwestern University, United States of America in 2004. Dr. Fayemi serves on numerous boards, including the governing board of the Open Society Justice Institute, Baobab for Women's Human Rights, African Security Sector Network, Advisory Board of the Global Facilitation Network on Security Sector Reform and Management Culture, Board of the ECOWAS Secretariat. He has written extensively on governance and democratization, civil-military relations, security sector issues in Africa. Among those recent books are Mercenaries, The African Security Dilemma, edited by Abdel Fattah Musa, Deepening the Culture of Constitutionalism, the Role of Regional Institutions in Constitutional Development in Africa, and Out of the Shadows, Exile and the Struggle for Freedom and Democracy in Africa. Tareq Fayemi is the last child of a family of 6. He comes from a long tradition of public service. His father, the late Chief Francis Falade Fayemi, retired from the Ondo State Civil Service in 1977, having served in the West Region, West State, and Ondo State respectively for over 25 years. In retirement, he later served as Councillor and Chairman of the Old Ekiti North Local Government between 1977 and 1979, and subsequently President Customary Court, covering parts of the Oye Division of Old Ekiti North Local Government, a Justice of Peace and Babebe of the St. Mary's County Church, Israel. The only Chief Fayemi was a well-known community leader and believer in the axiom that the only life that is worthy of being lived is the life of service to the community. That creed he shares with the JCs International. His son follows in this well-trodden path. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I have the singular honor of presenting this distinguished Nigerian, a dynamic, vibrant, loving, articulate, hard-working, and Nigerian This conference is Dr. John the Governor of the State, to deliver the second completion lecture of Abia University. Welcome to the please. It is always a matter of utmost pleasure for me to be on the university campus, to interact with scholars, students, and administrators, and indeed the world that is the world that normally comes to a university, and for which a university is created. Because the university is a veritable universe in a city. Even if based in a small town, the universe of a university transforms its locale into a city. A true university is a place that encompasses the world. It welcomes the world and opens out to the world. As the summit of higher education, the university is a veritable instrument, an institution of social transformation. Given that the university constitutes a world, or perhaps represents a mini world, a typical university campus, even when it is not on a single expansive land, is usually a big place.
It is usually big in its virtual and all physical space, big in its many disciplines, including colleges, schools, faculties, and departments, and big in terms of its labyrinth of rules and regulations. And we've just been alerted to one of such regulations. It's therefore easy to lose your way in a university. You can lose your way in terms of finding the specific place, classroom, or office that you're looking for. You can lose your way in terms of familiarity with the rules and regulations governing your conduct and action in the university. You can also lose your way in terms of finding the appropriate means and methods of achieving your goals within the university. In terms of the physical or spatial dimensions of finding or losing your way in the university, many universities around the world often have maps. They therefore place maps and directions and names of places as strategic places and points on the university campus. The story is told of a new student in a university who was attending an orientation program on the campus, the usual orientation that we attend when we are JAMBites. To make it easy for the new students to find their way around the campus, specific orientation arrows were placed around the campus. Just by the side of the hall where the orientation will take place, there was this big arrow on the map with the words, "You are here." One of the new students, exhausted from moving around the campus to find the hall, created a graffiti by the side of the arrow with the words, "But why?" This graffiti, though the work of a neophyte, on a university campus, if we consider it deeply, is actually the product of a very sophisticated mind that was yet unaware of his own potential philosophical depth. This question, but why, is both a personal and a collective question. A society can ask itself, why a university? Or why should we have a university? And the student, current or graduating, can ask himself or herself, respectively, why am I here? Or why did I attend a university? The last version of that question is one that those who are graduating from this university might be asking themselves now, after a few years of burning the proverbial midnight oil. Your Excellency, Chancellor, Vice Chancellor, distinguished guests, indeed the students, JAMBites, Stellites, and also graduating students need to ask themselves this question. However, the answers they provide cannot have meaning if the society at large is not able to satisfactorily answer the bigger question, which is, why a university? The individual student's answer to the question about why there is a need to have university education can only find meaning in the universe of the answers provided by the society at large. But the larger society cannot answer that question unless and until the university itself has answered the question adequately. If the sign in the university says, "You are here," the university needs to answer the question, why are we here? In other words, what are universities for? I have been asked to speak to the issue of the positioning the Nigerian universities within a dynamic global university system. And I'm afraid I'm going to take a bit of your time because I've had quite some long notice for this assignment, more than 6 months. So I've had time to reflect. on it. And as someone who has had to straddle both worlds of academia and active political engagement, sometimes I don't know which one I belong to. And those who are my associates and colleagues, I'm sure they are also confronted with that question all the time. As it's true, Professor Akinade is right. I feel a little uncomfortable in the real political circle. But at the same time, I know that my academic preparation offers me the opportunity to adapt to several worlds. So, I've been asked to speak on repositioning the Nigerian universities within a dynamic global university system. However, we cannot begin to examine how to reposition the university system without returning to the fundamental question that I raised. This is particularly so in a country in which in the last 3 decades, owing to a myriad of reasons, the university idea as well as the university idea have been lost. Almost 3 decades ago, precisely in 1986, the Nobel laureate and Nigeria's famous public intellectual, Professor Wole Soyinka, asked us that all the universities in Nigeria be shut down for 1 year, while we return to the table to rethink the university idea and restart the process of rebuilding the world-class university system that we once had. 24 years after Soyinka's wisdom was ignored, we're still confronted with the question that he raised by that position. How do we recover what we have lost? How do we reconstitute the university idea? When in 1862, one of the 3 oldest universities in India, the University of Bombay, which was started only 5 years earlier in 1857, awarded its first degrees. The Chancellor of the university, in his inaugural convocation address, urged the students to recollect that you are no longer pupils of any single school, but graduates of a university. Therefore, he added, your standards must henceforth be that of the whole educated world. In reminding students of that university, now called University of Mumbai, of that wisdom during the convocation earlier this year, the president of Harvard University, Professor Drew Frost, affirmed that universities are stewards of an unbroken and endless chain of inquiry. Between the statement of the 19th century first chancellor of the University of Mumbai and that of the current president of the most prestigious university in the world, Harvard University, is a fundamental declaration of the universality of the university and its central and original role in modern life. Every university identifies its core mission as teaching, research, and community engagement. But as they say, in the wisdom of our fathers, our ancients in Yoruba land, what lies beyond 6 is certainly more than 7. What lies beyond these 3 critical roles of the university is certainly far more complicated than the 3 words and phrases that encompass that mission. Which is why, when the new student in the story I told earlier saw the sign, "You are here," he asked the important question, but why? We can ask that too. Why is the mission and vision of the university more complicated than its 3 core roles of teaching, research, and community engagement suggest? This Young University, for instance, Osun State University, does not simply repeat the three universal core purposes of the university. There's a very good effort by the university founders to complicate these core purposes in the university's mission, vision and mission. The vision of Uni Osun is to be a center of excellence, providing high-quality teaching and learning experiences which will engender the production of entrepreneurial graduates capable of impacting positively on the environment while being globally competitive. From this vision, it is clear that the founders of this university not only recognize the core purposes of the university, they also acknowledge the potential universality of the university. Also in its mission, the Osun State University hopes to create, and I quote, a unique institution committed to the pursuit of academic innovation, skill-based training, and a tradition of excellence in teaching, research, and community service. By this vision and mission, Uni Osun declares to itself and its students, particularly its graduating students, that their standards must henceforth be that of the whole educated world. What then is the standard of the whole educated world? How can we relate that to the question, why are we here? And what are universities for? I will endeavor in this lecture to link these questions to the quest to reposition the Nigerian universities within a dynamic global university system. The university idea and the university ideal. Again, why are we here? I mean, why are the scholars, students, and the administrators of this university here? In fact, why is this university here? Let us go back in time, but we will not go back as far as the founding of the medieval European model, when the word university was derived from the Latin word Universitas Magistrorum et Scholarum, which roughly translates to a community of teachers and scholars, as it was originally coined by the Italian University of Bologna, founded in the year 1088, the first university in human history. As you might know, University of Bologna was followed by the University of Paris, France in 1150, Oxford University, England in 1167, Cambridge University, England in 1209, and the University of Salamanca, Spain in 1218. And we could go on and on before we joined that list in 1948. However, by which time the idea of a university had been fully consolidated in much of the modern world. In the 19th century, John Henry Newman, an evangelical Oxford University academic, attempted to answer the question, why a university, by elaborating what he called the idea of a university. A university, stated Newman, is the place to which 1,000 schools make a contribution, in which the intellect may safely range and speculate, sure to find its equal in some antagonist activity, and its judge in the tribunal of truth. It is a place where inquiry is pushed forward and discoveries verified and perfected, and rashness rendered innocuous and error exposed by the collision of mind with mind and knowledge with knowledge. It is the place where the professor becomes eloquent and is a missionary and a preacher, displaying its science in its most complete and most winning form, pouring it forth with the zeal of enthusiasm and lighting up his own love of it in the breast of its hearers. It is the place where the catechist makes good his ground as he goes, treading in the fruit day by day into the ready memory and wedging and tightening it into the expanding reason. It is a place which wins the admiration of the young by its celebrity, kindles the affections of the middle-aged by its beauty, and rivets the fidelity of the old by its associations. It is a seat of wisdom, a light of the world, a minister of the faith, an alma mater of the rising generation. It is this, and a great deal more, and demands a somewhat better head and hand than mine to describe it well. It is of course no surprise that John Newman, who was an Anglican and later a most prominent Catholic priest, intellectual, and founder of University College Dublin, imposes an evangelical mission on the university. Indeed, as a European invention, the medieval university was founded on the Christian cathedral or monastic schools. For instance, the coat of arms of Oxford University shows an open book with a Latin inscription that translates to, "The Lord is my light." In the case of Cambridge University, the motto, translated from Latin into English, is "From here, light and sacred draughts." If we pursue the alternative history of medieval university in the Islamic tradition, as symbolized by the Al-Azhar University in Cairo, which was founded in 972 as a madrasa, a school in Arabic, and the University of Timbuktu, located in present-day Mali, ignoring for the moment the mindless destruction that university is currently experiencing in the hands of the Tuareg rebels, which was founded in the 11th century, we will find a similar evangelical mission. The University of Timbuktu existed around the madrasa in the free mosques in Sankore, in Jengraba, and in Sisi. Against this backdrop, in many ways, the modern university can be described as one with a secular evangelical mission, that is, as the secular light of the world. This is so because the transformation of the world, making the world into a more perfect one, shedding greater light on the world through human knowledge, all constitute the overriding purpose of the university as a global phenomenon. When the modern university started in Africa, with the coming of Europeans and the imposition of colonialism, there were considerable debates about why higher education was needed in colonial Africa, and what the role of higher education should be in Africa's colonial present and post-colonial future. I will dwell briefly on the kernel of this debate to set the backdrop to my reflections on the challenges and prospects of repositioning the Nigerian university in a global context. The originating purposes of the African university. The colonial roots of the modern university in Africa have been elaborated and analyzed by many scholars. In the Nigerian context, the works of the lives of Drs. Kenneth Bellamy and J.T. Saunders, two of the principals of the University College of Ibadan, as the University of Ibadan was then known, and Professor J.F. Adeajayi, Professor Tekena Tamuna, Dr. Ikejani, Professor Okafo, Professor Babatunde Fafunwa have already explored this. However, it is important to recall that, as Professor Ade Ajayi reminds us, the roots of higher education in Nigeria go back to the colonial period when Nigerian leaders demanded a university as a means to their own emancipation. This is critical because while the emergence of the university in Europe was central to the European project of enlightenment or civilization, the emergence of the modern university in Africa in general, and in Nigeria in particular, was a specific understanding, contextualization, and leveraging of that enlightenment project as first and foremost one that was anchored on emancipation. The fact that the Nigerian anti-colonial activists insisted that the new university in Nigeria should be comparable in every way with the universities in Britain is a reminder of the fact that despite the specific local anchoring of the reason or justification of the need and existence of a university in Nigeria, the leaders were committed to ensuring that global standards were maintained in those early days. We are also reminded of the emancipatory potential of the university when we recall that the colonialists were very cautious in acceding to the request for the establishment of the university in colonial Nigeria. Their preference was for vocational schools run by different government departments, such as the School of Survey, the Marine School, the Railways Workshop, School of Agriculture, School of Medicine, Pharmacy, Engineering, and Education. Eventually, they established a higher college at Yaba. But given their knowledge of the role of the university, in a modern society, one struggling for a new nationhood, independence, and the benefits of modernity, the limited aims of the Yaba College became the rallying point of the nationalists. Therefore, the opening of the college in 1934 became, as Professor Ade Ajayi stated, in quote, a landmark in the history of the independence movement in Nigeria. As the pressure mounted on Imperial Britain to grant Nigeria what she truly desired in higher education, even that most eloquent defender of Pax Britannica, Marjorie Parham, had to concede in 1946 that it is not for us to invent a specifically adapted form of standard of intellectual life in the university sphere. We have to offer everything. We must give what we ourselves value most highly and keep nothing back. This was what the Nigerian nationalists wanted, and this was what they got in the founding of the first university in Nigeria, the University College Ibadan, in 1948. The university's motto, Rector Sapere Fund, was and remains, in its English translation, to think straight is the fountain of knowledge. With self-government and full independence in the horizon, the specific form of Nigerian nationalism and regional rivalry and competition fueled the new drive for the establishment of more universities. While the federal government planned to have a second university in the nation's capital, Lagos, the three regions were eager to also have their own universities. The Ashby's Commission report had concurred with the unrestrained desire to establish university in the regions. This was not merely for prestige and the assertion of regional autonomy, but more importantly, to harness the opportunities provided by a university as instruments of regional development and even-ended transformation. As Samuel Ateb attests, in the 1960s, the university was an agent of modernization, social mobilization, and economic growth. Consequently, the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, was established by the Eastern Region in 1960. Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria by the Northern Region in 1962, and the University of Ife, Ile-Ife, as it then was known, now Obafemi Awolowo University in the Western Region in the same year of 1962. What is most important to remember about this struggle among the regions to establish their own universities is that, as Professor Ade Ajayi also noted in a 1975 article, the new universities did not abandon the tradition of high standards and international nature of universities, but they stressed respect for an identity with the local cultures. And as I'm sure many of us remember, University of Ife stated unequivocally in its motto, "It's time for learning with culture." We can restate the two originating purposes of the university in late colonial and post-colonial Africa in general, and Nigeria in particular, as one, political, socio-economic, and intellectual emancipation of the country and people, and two, political, socio-economic, and intellectual development of the country and the people. These fundamental purposes became the bedrock on which the elaboration and expansion of the universities were built. Again, as Ade Ajayi noted, this tradition to maintain high standards had not inhibited or been inhibited by the need for expansion and adaptation. Indeed, the universities established in the 60s had their golden era in the 1970s and the 1980s. To give an example of the renamed University of Ife, as the university itself proudly advertises on its website even today, and I quote, "It is in the 1970s and the early 1980s that the university attained a foremost position among universities in Africa, with a vibrant academic and social atmosphere and a high international reputation." End of quote. The question that this poses is this: what has happened to the African, indeed the Nigerian university system, since the late 1980s and early 1990s? Your Excellency, the Chancellor, Vice Chancellor, distinguished guests, I am not here today to lament the fate of the Nigerian university. Rather, in making my own modest contribution regarding what needs to be done to reclaim and even transcend the excellence and global acclaim of the Nigerian university between the 1960s and mid-80s, I intend to explore the possibilities of a glorious future for the Nigerian university system, and by that token, our country. What the graduating class of 2012 and those who will follow them, the young people of this age, ask from us as leaders is not to merely bemoan the fate of our existing and surviving institutions, but to state clearly what should be done about the critical problems we face and how we intend to work expeditiously towards providing critical solutions. Many of you will remember that popular Karl Marx saying, "Philosophers have studied the world. All that remains is to change it." And as President Franklin D. Roosevelt said in his address to the Young Democratic Club in Baltimore, Maryland in April 1936, the temper of our youth has become more restless, more critical, and more challenging. Flaming youth has become a flaming question. And youth comes to us wanting to know what we propose to do about a society that hurts so many of them. There is much to justify the inquiring attitude of our youth. You have a right to ask these questions, practical questions. No man who seeks to evade or to avoid deserves your confidence. So, I do not intend to duck and die, my brothers and sisters, but to confront these questions frontally. The inquiring attitude of the youth that President Roosevelt spoke about almost 80 years ago has become even more inflamed and more intense in the global age. The universities, being what Professor Drew Forrest of Harvard University called stewards of an unbroken and endless chain of inquiry, are at the center of our collective quest to rise up to meet the challenges of the present age. As Professor Tagle Akin-Aina, one of our diasporan scholars, and currently Director of Higher Education at the Carnegie Corporation in New York, stated recently, the university in Africa and higher education in general remain a significant part of the overall social, economic, and cultural constitution of societies and nations. This is so because higher education contributes to the formation and deployment of human capital, the cultural and social construction of values and meaning, and the capacity for individual and collective emancipation from ignorance and domination. Higher education further contributes to how the energies and products of science, technology, and the improvement of material conditions are mobilized for the well-being of individuals and groups. It provides for the well-being of individuals and groups. It provides a platform for the advanced study, dissemination, and utilization of knowledge and its products for the benefit of society and its constituents. And as I stated earlier, I intend to confront the question of what has happened to the African, specifically the Nigerian university system, or the university idea since the late 80s and early 90s in a roundabout way, by offering suggestions on how to reposition the university system in the global age. I do this not merely as one who is also a visitor to a university, where, like here in Uni Osun, we are committed to building a truly competitive university within the global context, but more as a member of the university community myself. Let me reiterate the fundamentality of the knowledge industry as overrepresented by the university and higher education in the search for human progress and human civilization, particularly in the global age. This is even doubly critical for those of us who are at the margins of the global world. As Tagle Aina correctly observed, African universities operate at the fourth or fifth tiers of global knowledge production. As old and current experiences have shown, even when a country has huge natural resources, without the development of its human resources, a country with natural resources will continue to be subservient to countries with the developed human capability and capacity to extract, refine, and use those natural resources. The story of Africa, a continent that is perhaps the most blessed among other continents in terms of its natural resources, but one that has refused to fully develop its human resources and place these human resources at the center of our development agenda, is a well-known but a sad one. Top on the list of the fundamental crises of the continent is, of course, the crisis of higher education. Professor Olugbemi Ojegede, the Secretary General of the Association of African Universities, stated earlier this year, and I believe this deserves a long quotation, the emerging global landscape being drawn by recent developments has shown very clearly that knowledge, capability, and capacity, rather than natural resources, is the greatest determinant of a country's entry into an effective participation in global competitiveness. It goes without saying, therefore, that higher education contributes significantly to the political, scientific, technological, economic, social, and human development of any country. This is even more so for the developing countries of Africa, a continent of about 1 billion people, characterized by the poorest countries in the world, with the world's highest illiteracy rates, lowest participation rates in higher education, huge capacity development gaps, over 20 million seeking employment annually, with the youth constituting 60% of the unemployed, and a massive demand for tertiary education. End of quote. Against this backdrop, very sober backdrop, let me start with what I consider to be the first step that we must take in the mission to reposition Nigerian universities in a global age. And let me say with all emphasis that I can muster, that in Nigeria, as in many parts of sub-Saharan Africa, we must reinvent the university idea and rebuild the foundations of our contemporary universities to make them truly competitive in the global university system. The recent global ranking of universities in the world, despite its few problems, I believe reflects the state of affairs in Africa in general and in Nigeria in particular. Ibadan, Ife, Zaria, Nsukka, and Lagos used to rank among some of the best universities in the Commonwealth and in the world. In the last 2 decades, we have lost much ground. Therefore, in looking to the future, we must also look to the past. What were the best practices that made our earliest universities globally competitive? How can we harness the tradition of scholarship and nation building that made those universities superb citadels of learning and relate them to the emerging dynamics of world-class higher education in the present age? In answering this question, we must have in mind the fundamental responsibilities of the university in the 21st century. As the United States National Center for Public Policy and Higher Education states in its special report, given recent global changes, I quote, "Higher education has 2 fundamental responsibilities to help ensure the continued well-being of the nation today. 1, to provide graduates and the nation at large with the skills needed to be effective in a global, increasingly competitive economy in which corporations reach across nations and geographical divides in search of new markets, more efficient production, and less costly labor. And 2, to close the achievement gap between those students in this country who are advantaged educationally, culturally, and economically, and those who are not." There are several steps that must be taken to meet these 2 fundamental responsibilities. As some experts have stated, this will include the implementation of the 2006 Plan of Action for the second decade of education for Africa, a document which has been adopted by the African Union. This plan of action spells out the ingredients for effective, relevant, efficient, and revitalized higher education for Africa in a bid to make it globally competitive. They include encouraging greater mobility of African communities. And in this context, I would like to suggest that we rethink this function of quality assurance, which is now placed under the National Universities Commission. It is one of the important functions of that commission. There might be innovative ways, however, of ensuring that this function is performed in the best possible way so as to raise the current low standards. 3, adopting and adapting open and distance learning as instructional delivery mechanism in sub-Saharan Africa, as has been done successfully in other continents of the world, if Africa is to significantly raise its tertiary education enrollment ratio from the current 6% achieved through the face-to-face mode to at least 50% within the next 5 years. And I would particularly like to commend our own Vice Chancellor, who has started the process of distance learning education in Ekiti State University. Using information and communication technologies effectively for instructional delivery, professional communication to develop, produce, acquire, and distribute knowledge, skills, and competencies across the continent as fast as they are available. 5, building human resource base that will seek newer and effective ways to combat diseases, reduce energy costs, and address climate change. 6, creating centers of excellence within each region of the continent to develop robust postgraduate studies and develop strong research base with global competitive advantage. We should also try to create centers of excellence in Nigeria But given the poor results of the earlier effort, we also need to rethink this process because it has not produced much excellence. Indeed, my own brother, the governor of Osun State, Ogbeni Rauf Aregbesola, has already broached the subject of a regional center of excellence by pooling resources within our universities to create a Southwest University. And 7, seeking opportunities for collaboration and partnership on equal and mutually beneficial platforms with the international world, including universities in other continents, development partners, organizations and agencies interested in higher education in Africa. Excellencies, distinguished guests, the ingredients of this continental plan of action still needs further elaboration in the local contexts. All the steps that I have discussed and much more largely depend on adequate financing of the university. From the second half of the 1980s, when oil prices fell in the international market, it became clear to us in Nigeria that government alone can no longer bear the absolute cost of higher education. Even state-owned universities cannot hope to depend absolutely on the government. There are many reasons for this. First, the explosion in our population since the 1980s has meant that government alone cannot provide sufficient number of universities to cater to the needs of an increasingly youthful population. 2, the dwindling resources of a monoproduct economy, such as Nigeria, translate to greater competition for funds among many facets of governmental priorities. Consequently, despite the best efforts, the percentage of funds devoted to education in general and to higher education in particular has become insufficient to meet the expanding needs of that area of public expenditure. This is where the private universities constitute a critical partnership with public universities. No doubt, a lot of private, both individual and organizational, resources have been invested in recent years into the creation and sustenance of private universities. I think the owner of that phone wants me to put it is a welcome development. However, it is important to remind those involved in this task that investment in private higher education is not an investment in the classical neoliberal sense. As the global poet, and I'm proud to add, a distinguished son of Ekiti and citizen of the world, Professor Leo Shundari said in his valedictory speech at the University of Ibadan in 2005, it's time we realize that a university can never be run as a cost-effective corporation. There are simply certain forms of knowledge that cannot be judged on their market value. Therefore, any individual or organization that aims to make a profit from establishing a university is a danger to the very idea and ideal of a university itself. A university, whether established by a state, an organization, or an individual, cannot be owned by any of these bodies or persons in the normal sense. This is because a university is a public trust. Therefore, the overall value of the university is beyond the market. It is beyond economics, and it is even beyond politics. The true value of the university represents the totality of our common humanity and the possibilities of our collective progress as a community. Still on the issue of funding, I regret to note that in this country, we have not developed the desirable culture of endowment in the area of education, the best form of philanthropy. This is something to which governments and private individuals need to pay attention. To build world-class universities and reposition our existing university, the largest chunk of their resource base has to come from endowment. I therefore call on wealthy Nigerians and corporate citizens, and even the not so wealthy, to show full commitment to the creation of a better, more egalitarian, and more civilized society through regular grants and endowment to the universities. There are many Osun State indigenes that I know, for instance, both at home and abroad, who can afford to give this university a personal donation of between 1 to 20 million naira every year for the rest of their lives. Imagine if 100 citizens of the state of Osun, or even others who are not necessarily citizens of the state of Osun, but who for one reason or the other have decided to be beneficent towards the university, gives 5 million naira to Uni Osun every year for the next 10 years. That would mean that apart from the government subvention to this university, the university will get 500 million naira every year. If such endowments are properly invested, this university will within a decade have the resources to build world-class laboratories, fill the libraries with books and e-journals, and increase the opportunities for its researchers to get research grants. We produced world-class scientists in Nigeria in the past. We can no longer do so if we lack the enabling environment for good scientific research, experiments, and exposure to the state-of-the-art in other climes. Imagine if that number were multiplied by earlier number, were multiplied by another 500 people, giving this university 1 million naira every year for another 20 years. For the avoidance of doubt, this is not too much for many Nigerians to give. 1 million naira a year is for some people not even up to what they spend for a first-class ticket on British Airways to London. And I know people who do this arguably once a month, if not twice. Another important way, outside of endowment and funding, to reposition our universities in a dynamic global system is linked to resources. And I'm not talking about material resources or financial resources now. I'm talking about scholarly resources, particularly books and journals, both soft and hard copies. The state of the library in the Nigerian university system leaves a lot to be desired. This is one of the biggest impediments to the flowering of ideas and the development of world-class scholarship and the training of world-class students, both undergraduate and postgraduate. As someone who met his wife in the Ezekiel Oluwasomi Library, I know that university library used to be fantastic. While I recognize the valiant efforts by many of our university administrators working with international organizations to reinvent the libraries, much more still needs to be done. One critical suggestion is for these institutions to find foreign partners that can help in facilitating access to online publications, particularly journals for our scholars and students. I know some of our universities are now linked to JSTOR and are regularly accessing international journals online, but we can still do a lot more. There are also many innovative ways of ensuring that foreign publishers, as a mark of their public international commitment, are able to send certain number of copies of their latest publications to our libraries here free of charge. If this happens, it is obvious that they will not be able to send to every university. In that case, we also need to establish a very efficient and effective means of interlibrary loans in the Nigerian university system. There is no reason why a student of environmental science or scholar Newsman Danfodio University Sokoto, who wants to compare and contrast the problem of desertification in Sokoto State with the challenges of erosion in Imo State, should not be able to get a critical study of erosion lying in the library of Imo State University Owerri through interlibrary loan. Still related to this is the challenge of new technologies. To be able to accomplish the above easily and seamlessly, we need to create a new technologically friendly environment in our universities by investing heavily in new technologies. Going through the website of UniOsun, before I wrote my lecture, I decided I just wanted to see what was on the website of the university, and I checked. And I was impressed to see that ICT is taken very seriously by this university. But a lot more is required. The full networking of our universities is a task that must be accomplished if we're to compete in a global age. No university campus should be without wireless internet in this age. We must work towards investing in this. There are several benefits of this, a few of which I can mention here. All and every of our higher institutions ought to be so well linked through the information and communication technologies such that all our scholars, administrators, and students will be able to collaborate and exchange ideas and learn best practices without stress. Also through heavy investment in new technologies, students of UniOsun who are interested in a special branch of medical sociology, which may be offered by a world-class expert in Harvard University, may be able to log on through Skype every week to the professor's lecture in Harvard by special arrangement. This is already happening in many parts of the world. Students in China are taking classes through Skype in American universities. Also, American students who want to learn certain aspects of Ifa from a professor of Yoruba religion will have the opportunity through Skype to sit down in the classroom in Atlanta and watch the lecture of the Nigerian professor as it is going on in Osogbo. This is also advertised to the world that in spite of the brain drain, we still have excellent and world-class scholars who are toiling in Nigeria despite all the odds. In fact, through such a system, as suggested here, students may have the benefit of having Chief Yemi Elebuibon's guest lecture from Osogbo Festival beamed by Skype to students in any corner of the Americas, Europe, or Asia. Also, through investment in new technologies, we can save many of the trees that we cut regularly to make papers, which leads to deforestation. Students can submit their papers to their lecturers without having to print them out. And the lecturers can read the papers online, save the trees, grade the scripts, and email them back to their students. We must also evolve a means by which we can use the talent. This is my third point. Funding, scholarly resources, and our diaspora. We must evolve a means by which we can use the talent and expertise of Nigerian academics in the diaspora and African academics as well to enhance our university system in every way, from teaching to postgraduate research supervision and to even university administration, all in very innovative ways. The task is for those of us in government to work with the administrators of both public and private universities to evolve innovative ways of doing this. Our government in Ekiti already works with EXU management of this particular goal. As Professor Adigun Agbaje, former Deputy Vice Chancellor Academics of the University of Ibadan, told the United States Chronicle of Higher Education a couple of years ago, our diaspora is part of our resources. And in a resource-strapped environment, we must draw on all our resources. End of quote. Another distinguished friend of mine, African scholar in the diaspora, Professor Paul Tiembe-Zeleza, argued, and I quote, Africa, perhaps the least educated and most underdeveloped continent in the world, has the most educated population in the world's most developed country, America. This gaping mismatch is undoubtedly a tragedy. But it is one tragedy that can be turned in Africa's favor if effective strategies are developed to turn the brain drain into brain gain, or turn it into what some have called brain mobility. And this I say to a lot of my friends who are academics in the diaspora, that for us in Ekiti, we're not too ambitious to request that they all return home in one fell swoop. We know that that may not happen because of all of the endowments they have and the resources they put in places where they now reside. But they can give us their short-term vacation periods, their sabbatical, to come home, engage in research, help teach students, we would benefit a lot from that, rather than insisting that they must always return home, which is a little romantic these days. So I think it's more of brain mobility rather than brain gain that we're talking about here. So there's therefore no reason why many of our scholars based in Europe and America, and even elsewhere in Africa, cannot be made to teach in summer schools or teach specific summer classes in most of our universities when they come home every year or when they are on sabbatical leave. I've noticed lately, I think I've seen reading in the newspapers, Professor Toyin Falola must have given up to about 7 or 8 lectures in the last 2 months, going around various universities in the Nigerian system. And I know that he hasn't done that in a while, so it's something that we all must commend. I have 2 friends there, professors from America too, who joined me in attending this lecture, who are also doing similar things, either permanently back at home or wanting to help us with the quality of our scholarship here. Professor Okeo Yejekwe, ex-World Bank, ex-ETA, somewhere sitting there. I'm Professor Lisa Aubrey of Arizona State University, who is also connected to the Center for Black and International Understanding here in Osun State. Through this, we can expose our students and even their colleagues to the latest thinking on every field of human endeavor in the world and encourage international forms of mentoring for our students and young scholars. If we accomplish some of the above, I have no doubt that this will lead to other benefits, one of which will be curriculum review in our university. There is a need for constant change and diversification of areas and focal points of teaching. There are many of our universities who still have courses that were taught when I was in the university and when even people who were there in much earlier, between 1960s and 70s, are on the curriculum. Even some of our professors have been teaching the same course for about 3 decades now. For instance, how many of our communications departments now offer courses in the latest cutting-edge ICT and their relationship with modern society? I know for a fact, up till a few years ago, some political science departments in Nigeria, and don't ask me to name names, still had politics of communist states in Eastern Europe in their syllabus. What new technologies and new discoveries drive the curriculum in our agricultural science faculties? We have the experience of these even in our little Ekiti, this Stone Age attitude I mean, when we introduced our computer on every desk policy in our secondary schools. Not a few commentators, including university academics, articulated the view that it was an unnecessary, expensive, and irrelevant scheme. Just a few months after, JAMB announced that its examination will now be computer-based. Pray, how would a student who is not familiar with ICT perform in such an examination? Your guess is, of course, as good as mine. What I am saying in summary is that we cannot afford to close our minds to technological innovations in the university system, in the university setting, if we want to compete globally. Related to the above is the need for our universities to recognize and fully embrace the fact that the global university today is one of interdisciplinarity. The old practices of protecting disciplinary talks, and academics here will know what I'm talking about, have become so obsolete that they can no longer fit into current practices in a truly modern university. It is also important to underscore a perverse practice in our university system in the last 2 decades. Scholarship is a global endeavor. We delude ourselves and shortchange our future if we set different and lower standards for ourselves. Academic publishing in the Nigerian university in recent years has become, sadly for many academics, a Dugbe market endeavor. People rush to publish, and I see a lot of this in my own field. Just about anything, in just about any journal, many of them absolutely devoid of even the most basic standards. Everyone starts a journal in their backyard, at his or her convenience, and prints the journal only to serve the purpose of A&P and ensuring that people get largely undeserved promotion. The idea of a refereed journal has been bastardized by some Nigerian academics to the point that even traders now have more original things to say about our society than some of our scholars. Many of these Dugbe market journals have proliferated on our campuses. We are now producing a generation of scholars who no longer have a good idea of what it means for a journal to be truly international. And I don't want to be misunderstood. The fact that a scholarly journal is published in Osogbo, Ife, Sokoto, Kaduna, Owerri, or Wilberforce Island does not mean it cannot be international. That's not the point I'm making. After all, only about 3 decades ago, scholars around the world struggled to publish in journals that were based in Nigerian universities. I know of a fact, for instance, that ODU, a Journal of West African Studies, and the Ife Quarterly Journal of Administration, for many years were highly respected, internationally refereed journals. Why are current generations of scholars eager to cut corners by publishing in third-rate journals while avoiding the high standards of world-class journals? Why are scholars so eager these days to become professors even before they learn how to profess? Why are we so enamored of producing VCs without CVs? Where is the Zaria School of Architecture of old? Where is the Ife School of Administration of old? The Lagos School of Engineering? How can we reinvent such famous vanguards of scholars who made important interventions in global scholarship? In repositioning the Nigerian university, therefore, we also need to rethink the linkage between town and gang that constantly relates its research to local and global needs. Our universities, in the best tradition of research, should identify social problems and work towards providing solutions. Our industries and governments must also be ready to partner with universities to do this. We need to address such questions as how to ensure that our universities and our engineering departments are able to pool resources to end our power generation problem, distribution and supply problems. Our scholars in the engineering department, both at home and abroad, have the capacity for this. Therefore, how can we empower them to become social problem solvers rather than mere repeaters of theories in the classroom? If the government and the society at large empower our scientists, I believe they will be able to lead the needed technological and scientific revolution in our country. Let us challenge the sciences and engineering faculties of our universities to start by even generating their own power. Solar, wind, coal, whatever, their own water, and recycling their own garbage. Let the universities provide the lead. We can ensure the necessary legal environment for this. I know for a fact that the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture in Ibadan generates its own power. It's an institution that is sufficient for itself. Why shouldn't all of our universities do the same? In linking town to gown, though, the university must also challenge the tyranny of value-neutral knowledge. While it is attractive to pursue academic objectivity in the intellectual realm, one must caution that such objectivity is always for some purpose, and we often cannot separate our interests from our interpretations of society around us. University scholars must be ready to wage a war of positions on behalf of the people in defense of the defenseless, as the Italian sociologist Antonio Gramsci urged upon us. Scholars must not shy away from the development process. Indeed, committed scholarship must help provide the roadmap for people's empowerment. Academics, in my humble opinion, must not be content with sterile scholarship in the ivory tower. A major duty of transformative scholarship in the global context is to help provide the intellectual ammunition for the formulation, articulation, and implementation of public policies. Again, as Paul Zeleza argued, the context and constraints that shape academic production are subject to changes emanating as much from the academy itself as from the wider society. On a personal note, this is why I am dusting my own books to share some thoughts and reflections on a regular basis in my local university in Ado-Ekiti, where we are finalizing plans with the cooperation of the Vice Chancellor and subject to the approval of the University Senate to establish an institute in my own area of study, an Institute of Peace and Security Studies, to produce graduate students and researchers in a field that is most necessary at a time that our country is daily ravaged by challenges of insecurity. We must reverse the tendency that often results in our academics abandoning scholarship and teaching completely once they move on to other things, politics, business, or administration. I hope at the end of my brother's term of office, I know him anyway, he doesn't have a choice, he has to stay engaged with the university community. Because very often, retired vice chancellors just pack their bags and move on to the market, to put it down. If we must reposition the university within a global context, the university must not be a closed mind in its intellectual tradition. It must consciously provide space for practitioners to share their experiences in public life. Your Excellency, the Chancellor, Vice Chancellor, distinguished guests, Andrew Carnegie, the late Scottish-American industrialist, remains for me one of the most important philanthropists in the last 2 centuries. After amassing a lot of wealth, he turned to philanthropy with a close attention to education. He established a few foundations that still give grants for educational courses around the world almost a century after he died. In 1887, Andrew Carnegie stated that upon no foundation but that of popular education can a man erect the structure of an enduring civilization. He lived this magazine, and its immortality rests on that magazine, one to which he gave his wealth. Carnegie's life of devotion to education, exemplified by this magazine, is a challenge to all of us today. To erect an enduring civilization, we must make every investment in popular education. The university is the pinnacle of this investment. In this audience today are people acting within or outside the university system who have made important sacrifices for building and sustaining an excellent tradition of public education. I wish to acknowledge the sacrifices and commitment of these people, despite the great challenges faced by the university system in Nigeria. I wish to commend my brother and friend, Professor Shola Akinade, for his pioneering effort in the establishment and running of this university. However, as is evident from my lecture today, we can only call upon him and others like him to make further sacrifices. Again, in the age-old tradition of our fathers, Baoku, Sheotu. Interesting enough, we are in the state of Osun, where the state anthem is a regular reminder that we have work to do. Ishewa Fuilewa. If the state, and indeed Nigeria, must take its rightful place in a global world, if we must erect an enduring civilization, it cannot be done without a strong foundation in popular education, the highest of which is the university. To the graduating students, I wish you well. I also wish to remind you of the words of the Chancellor of the Bombay University. You are no longer pupils of any single school, but graduates of the university. Your standards must henceforth be that of the whole educated world. In the tradition of Carnegie, whom I quoted earlier, I would like as a token to contribute 5 million naira to that endowment. I thank you for your attention.
Nice speech. Yes, I think we need to marry a town with the ground.